What we're doing today is I'm introducing you to Investor Climate Action Plans, the Expectations Ladder and Guidance that we launched yesterday, the 20th of May, 2021. This is a project of the Investor Agenda, and our partners are the Asia Investment Group on Climate Change, CDP, the Investor Group on Climate Change in Australia, IIGCC in Europe, PRI, and UNEP-FI. We've worked together with these partners over the last year to develop this ladder and expectations. Next slide. So background, the investors have lots of different approaches now to addressing climate risk. And our experience over the last many years is that investors have begun working on climate risk, begun looking at climate opportunities in their investment strategies. Many of them have taken robust actions to address climate. Some have started with policy work. Some have started with investment policies or proxy voting guidelines. Some have done work on their portfolios. Some have done work on their disclosure. Many have done work engaging with the companies they own. But it's been kind of a piecemeal approach. They've taken one action, they've learned from that and then taken another. But there hasn't been a comprehensive way of articulating what each investor has as their own climate action plan. And certainly there has been no collective action to try and align these investment actions around the world. So that's the purpose of this tool. This is our opportunity to begin to address climate as a systemic risk systemically and try and take collective action at a speed and direction that is agreed upon around the world. So the ICAP Expectation Ladder provides investors with guidance to support them, whether they're just beginning or whether they're ramping up and taking comprehensive action. It tries to help them place their actions on this ladder so that they can see where they are today and where they're going. And the goal is ultimately to rapidly accelerate all investor actions in support of a global net zero emissions economy by 2050 or sooner. Next slide. So the investor partners developed the ICAP Expectations as a summary of actions in 4 tiers, denoting progress from tier 4 to tier 1. It's designed to help both asset managers and asset owners, those who have already set net zero targets for their portfolios, and those who are just beginning this journey. The actions are initiative neutral, so we can use this ICAP's expectation ladder with those who have joined things like the Net Zero Asset Manager Initiative or the Paris Aligned Investment Initiative, but they don't have to join an initiative to be using this tool as a way to begin taking more robust and comprehensive action. The guidance which accompanies the ladder is really just a sort of an explanation of what the ladder is, gives some direction on how to develop a climate action plan across the 4 areas of the investor agenda. So the 4 areas, like I just said before, include investment, policy advocacy, corporate engagement, and investor disclosure. And so the goal with the ICAP, the Investor Climate Action Plan ladder, is to make sure that every investor is acting in all 4 areas. So the guidance gives a little more detail and points to some tools that the partners have produced. Of course, those are not the only tools in the market. So there are tools coming from investment consultants. There are tools being developed by data providers. All of those we expect will be used as the investors take their actions, but the guidance gives a good list of the ones that the partners have produced. So 2 approaches. One, some investors will put out a comprehensive climate action plan, singular. And we've already seen some of our investors here in North America, like New York Common, put out a single plan. And then that plan will evolve over time. But other investors will put out a variety of documents and collectively call those their climate action plans. So for example, we have investors who established investment beliefs. We have some who've developed proxy voting guidelines. Those would be in the governance category. We have some that have done a lot on policy, and they put out public statements about their policy actions, their advocacy at the national or state or international level. So you might see a variety of documents coming together in investor climate action plans, or you could see a single document from any one investor. I importantly not replace TCFD or other disclosure or reporting mechanisms. If you are in listen mode, if you could go on mute, that would be fine. Thank you. Go ahead, Natalie, next slide. So how they fit together, obviously corporate engagement, moving the companies that are in the portfolio, that's a really important part of getting the whole portfolio towards net zero. Investment, so making the choices as you buy and sell, as you invest in debt or projects. So all of those pieces of the investment project, that fits together with corporate engagement. Policy advocacy, as we all know, sets the table for what investors will do. If we get clear policy signals at a national and global level, that will stabilize capital markets and really support investors on this journey. And then finally, TCFD is the standard for investor disclosure, but those reports that are coming out, the TCFD reports from investors, are getting better and better. They're getting more specific. They're really both now looking forward and backward. And so it's really important that that information come out publicly so that we can move together. Governance is an underlying theme. None of this works unless top to bottom, from the board, whether it's a public pension board made up of trustees or a single trustee, or the governing board of a publicly traded asset manager, or the board of a privately held asset manager. At the top level of the organization, there has to be accountability for all of the investor climate actions. Next. So this is not what the ladder is, actually. You all got that, I think, attached to your calendar item. And if you're listening to this webinar later, you'll find the expectations ladder on the investoragenda.org website. So it's there and it's on the series website. But this is a sort of a model of how the four areas fit together. So investment at the first stage, we're seeing our members invest part of the portfolio aligned with a 2-degree products. At tier 3, getting to a higher level of ambition, aligning the portfolio with a 1.5-degree future, companies, products, projects, a more comprehensive approach. And then at tier 1, we've got really deep alignment with companies aligned and the asset classes across the board, really focused on a 1.5-degree future. In corporate engagement, explicitly integrating climate change into proxy voting guidelines is a first step, but then filing, co-filing, all of those really ambitious actions, working on board governance at the top tier is an expectation. Policy advocacy, series, of course, supports many global sign-on statements. That's first level of activity for many investors. That's an easy thing to do. You can work with all of the partners in the investor agenda on those global statements. But really at the top tier, it's reviewing lobbying activities and all of the trade associations, both the trade associations that the investors belong to and the trade associations that the companies they hold belong to. So really doing a deep dive on what is aligned policy work And so making sure that the investors are doing that. Much of series regulatory work will fit into that top tier. So as we work with the SEC to get good disclosures, we're hoping that the investors will come with us. Next. So in disclosure, as I said, starting with the TCFD disclosures, assessing what investors are currently putting out, and then at tier 1, publishing an independent third-party assessment of the investors' climate change reporting. So getting external verification is the highest level activity that we have here. For governance, defining roles and responsibilities and aligning achievement with executive remuneration incentives. In one of our last presentations yesterday, or the day before, I guess, we heard from one pension fund, oh, we can never do that because we're governed by public service, civil service salary requirements. So don't expect that our investment professionals are going to get incentives for acting on climate. But that's not true for many of the asset managers. For many of the asset managers, there could be robust executive remuneration incentives for achieving the goals of robust climate action. So that's the trajectory in terms of governance. So of course, the expectations ladder is not exhaustive. This is just a sample, but even in the 4-page version, we're not trying to capture everything that investors can or should be doing. But the idea is to give investors a snapshot of what comprehensive and collective action looks like, and to help them do the self-assessment of where they are on the ladder towards really robust action. So I think with that, we're ready to take some questions and answers. We'll stop the recording, but I do want to note that if you're listening to this at a later date, there are frequently asked questions. The guidance is available, and we would welcome your questions. Feel free to send an email to spalding@ceres.org or any of our relationship managers. We'd be happy to answer questions and help support the investor community as they begin to use this expectation ladder.